Hi, I'm Heather from Hey Booktubes, and today is my September reading wrap-up. In the month of September, I read 36 books. I DNF'd 12 of them, and so I'm going to talk about 24 of them today. Of the 24, 10 are volumes of manga, so I did finish my manga TBR. Thank you to the 30 and 30 challenge hosted by Shay, Izzy, Brie, and Ashley. That really helped me. Also, I wanted to talk about them all in the same wrap-up, so that really helped me. And I have officially finished the 20 volumes of manga that Izzy sent me, so Izzy's the best. I love her. As always, we're going in chronological order, and my next video is my third quarter DNF wrap-up, so you will get all of the DNF. There's a lot there. There's a lot of trash books. But anyways, that's the next video. Or at least it's Saturday's video. You might get a bonus one, I don't know. So, chronological order. The first one is by A Vengeance, which is Blood Oath number 3 by R.L. Caulder. I gave this 3 stars. I read the first 2 books right at the end of August, the last couple days of August, and then I read this one. This one introduced a few elements that I really disliked. So the premise for the series is a paranormal why choose. You have a slayer that gets forcibly turned into a vampire, and then she is making do with her new life amongst her enemies, with her entire family slaughtered and everyone that she's ever known turned against her, right? And I like this why choose because the guys are not particularly cruel or bullying. Even though they are enemies, it doesn't feel like you're reading abuse and calling it, calling it angst or whatever. So, but in this volume in particular, we do finally get our first group sex scene. That hadn't happened yet, but you have at the end of book 2 a betrayal because one of them has an abusive father, and that father is threatening to kill his mother, and so because of that he kind of betrays the main character, and the main character knows this. She knows this, and she's still finding that she just can't really forgive him for it. And I'm like, he didn't even do anything to you other than be like, no, I'm not interested. And it was literally to save his mother, and you have all of this conditioning and everything. Like, the fact that she was like, I understand, but I can't forgive, really annoyed me, okay? Also in this book, a talking sword is introduced, and the sword was so incredibly annoying. I can't even begin to tell you. Next, I read The House Witch by Delemhach. I have no idea how to say the author's name. And I gave this 5 stars. This is a cozy, domestic, funny, romantic fantasy. The house witch is a particular type of witch. Most witches are elementals, but this is a mutation and they're looked down on. Witches were hunted up until about 50 years ago, and still a lot of people don't trust witches. And he is going to become the royal cook, and his power comes from his home, so having his home be the castle actually kind of increases his power. And he's very sweet, and he has a romance with a noble lady who is also a spy master. You have content warnings for abuse. His father was abusive. Homophobia, one of his friends basically is gay, and there's a lot of casual homophobia in the world, and I don't know that necessarily reflects on the author in any way, but it's definitely present in the book. Also, sexual harassment and miscarriage are all things that are mentioned and are themes of side characters in the book. This book is 658 pages, and I loved it. I will say I loved it. But it's long and nothing really happens. This is very much, you're watching him cook and you're watching all of these characters. It's slow moving. There is some plot which doesn't really come to an end because there are a couple more books in the series which are significantly shorter than this one, but not a lot happens in this book. So if all of that cozy, funny, fantasy romance, if all that sounds good, then go for it. If it doesn't, you're not gonna like it. Then I read Game Between the Suits volume 1 and 2. I gave both of these 3 stars. They are at work. They're like work competitors. She's actually like the boss, and she doesn't want to be in a relationship, and they have like this game going where first one to fall in love loses or whatever, and she's so mean to him and like doesn't believe anything that he says and is just like he's always lying and he doesn't really mean it and it's just to win the game. And I don't think that he is lying just to win the game. And honestly, it didn't really work for me. It didn't. I didn't care if they ended up happy or sad. Then I reread Bayou Moon, which is the Edge #2 by Ilona Andrews. This is the second book in the read along that we are doing and our next book for October. I have never read before, so I'm excited about that. I gave this 5 stars. However, I do remember why I did not continue this series after reading this book the first time. Mostly because there's a lot of body horror and magical body modifications and perversions, if you will, some of that being against your will, and some of that is to loved ones of our main characters. There's also child abuse, ableism, institutionalization, especially of children and others. It's the changelings and death of side characters. It's a very dark, paranormal fantasy. Still pulled at my heartstrings, still really made me root for this couple. There is still some humor, but it's a lot darker than most of Ilona Andrews' books, particularly with the body horror stuff. That's not really a thing that's very present in their other books. So she lives in the Edge, which is in between the magical world and our world, and they are in the bayou, and they have this big old family but not a lot of money, right? And there are feuds between them and other families, and all of these things are coming to a head, and her parents are missing, and she is all of a sudden the head of the family. And so she meets this guy, and he is a character from the first book. He's a soldier, a spy, a shifter, and there's a lot of prejudice against shifters, and they have a romance, and that aspect is great, but I can definitely see why I didn't continue, because this vein of paranormal is not really for me. It's not what I enjoy. Then I read Bratva Bride, which is Bratva #1 by TJ Maguire. I gave this 3 stars. You have a tall, lethal Bratva princess, so I really like that she is able to hold her own and that her father supports her and her brothers support her, and she is part of the business and is just as trained as they are, right? That can be rare in these books. And she is going to have a marriage of convenience with the Italian heir. There are a lot of errors and inconsistencies in this book, and things that bugged me because I was like, you already said this was true and now you're saying this. And there were also just like quite a few things that didn't really make sense and interrupted the flow of the story for me. So there were things, I liked the couple, I liked them, but it was not a good book. Then I read The Duchess War, which is Brother Sinister, #1 by Courtney Milan. I gave this 5 stars. You have content warnings for PTSD and transphobia. So her father dressed her up as a boy, as a child, and that became public knowledge. So she has been hiding her identity basically under another name, and she's just a wallflower, and she needs to get married to take the financial burden off of her great aunts. She really needs to not let anybody know how interesting she is, basically. And, you know, he's a duke, yada yada. Now, in the novella of this that starts this series, you follow his father raped a governess, and she is the main character of that novella after the events of that. So his brother is the product of rape, and so because of that, he went to school with his brother, and he loves his brother, and he, you know, found out that his father was a horrible person and stuff, and he was never loved as a child, all of that. So he has just really shut himself off in a lot of ways, and he's trying to do a lot of good with his position, but he's doing that from his place of privilege, and he doesn't always realize who's going to pay the consequences for his choices, right? Because he's untouchable. I did tear up at this one. Then I read The Heiress Effect, which is the second book, 5 stars. I sobbed in this one. I was crying in the middle of the night. I was awake. I had hurt my neck and I couldn't sleep. It was like the first night after I hurt my neck. And so I was laying in bed on all these pillows, laying in bed, my husband's sleeping beside me, and I am reading this book with just tears running down my face, sobbing. trying to be quiet so I don't wake him, and just, it was rough. So this one is about the bastard brother, the product of the rape that we referenced in the first book. So he is getting married to a woman who has to be so incredibly unlikable on purpose. Part of it is that she wasn't really accepted when she was trying, but she has become unlikable on purpose because her sister is suffering from some sort of epilepsy-like condition, and they have a guardian. Her sister is not of age yet, and the guardian is doing a lot of things with quack doctors to try and cure her, and he's just making her life absolutely miserable, which is why we're against ableism, because nobody deserves to be treated with like that, regardless of their disability. And so because of that, she is only allowed to live with them if she's not married, and she has to accept any offer of marriage that she gets. And so because of that, she is just unbearable in public situations, so that nobody will like her enough to want to marry her, because she has a ton of money, a huge dowry. And because of that, she really just has to be the absolute worst to try and discourage people from marrying her for her fortune. I felt for all of them. I felt for them so much. I was just like, oh. Yeah. So other content warnings would be her sister's epilepsy, medical malpractice, experimentation, abuse, asylum, and the heiress is threatened with rape to force a marriage. So all of that, but he has spent his whole life trying to be accepted, and she just refuses to be, and he wants to be a politician, and they can't be together, and she needs him. Oh. Then to get over all of my like deep emotions over these books, I read A Walk in the Park by Rebecca Weatherspoon, which Tracy at Bookend to Bookend gifted me, which was just incredibly sweet of her, and I'm so glad that she did, because I really liked this book. I gave this 4 stars. This is a novella. It is a fat black couple, and they go to adopt a dog. There's a whole bunch of mix-ups, and they are going to have to share this dog, so they have co-doggy custody, and they're just sweet to each other. And they just get in a relationship, and you just see them be sweet to each other and kind of fall for each other. And that's really it. And I loved it. This is the perfect palate cleanser. Just a feel-good book. A feel-good book. And one that, you know, I think that everyone would enjoy if that sounds good to them. Then I read The Friend Contract, which is Hamilton Brothers #1 by Julia Anderson. I gave this 3 stars. My first book by Julia Anderson was the second book in the series, and I skipped this one because it's friends to lovers, and I didn't think that the tropes would really work for me. But I'm kind of caught up on her new releases, and I was in the mood for one of her books, so I did pick this up. I am glad that I skipped this one originally, because it's not for me. It's not my tropes. It's not like what I enjoy. There are content warnings for she had a historical miscarriage. They're friends to lovers, and she is a latent wolf or a panther. I think she's a panther. He's a bear. I don't know. She just absolutely does not believe him when he tells her, and has been telling her for years, that they're mates. And like, she just won't listen to anybody, and she's convinced that it won't work, and her magic will repel him and all this stuff for no reason. For no reason. Why would he be lying to you? Like, none of it makes any sense, and she stuck with it. She was gonna die on this hill. She absolutely refused to believe that they could be mates. And that just annoyed me, because I was like, what are you even doing? There's no reason for you to do this at all. This is weird. Then I read Ruthless Enemy, which is Ruthless Enemies #1 by Marion Blackwood. I gave this 4 stars. This is a metal mage, and he basically kind of rules the underground of the city, and her father was collateral damage in a dark mage battle. I would say I think that this world makes more sense if you already read Ruthless Villains. He was sold as a child and is claustrophobic. We didn't really go into his time in that way, but still a content warning for that. I will say I really enjoyed the twist. A lot of a good portion of this author's books are mediocre, but there are little things in there that really do bring the mediocrity up to where I really like reading them, even though I'm not going to claim that they're particularly good. I still have a great time. Then I read Outbride, Beauty and the Beast, volumes 1, 2, and 3. This is a Why Choose. She's the only human. It's dubious consent. She's 15, and I'm just gonna pretend like that's not the thing. But why did we need to do that? No reason. Didn't need to do that. So she's the only human left. They need to have babies to save the world. Also, their fluids help neutralize the toxins in the air, so we have lots of fluid application. I'll read more, why not? Then I have Fighting the Pole, which is River Rain number 5 by Kristen Ashley. 5 stars. 5 stars. Loved it. I love this series. You really cannot read them as standalones, and there's a heavy content warning for suicide of a loved one. Throughout all the books, this particular book, our male main character is the son of the guy that committed suicide. So it's a little heavier in here. Not as heavy as it was in the first book. I think the first book in the series is the heaviest book in the series, but it's still very present. He's a billionaire. He inherited $1 billion, more than $1 billion. His father was a tech genius and one of the richest men on earth. He has spent, all of his time trying to fix the companies and get rid of a lot of corruption and give away his money, and has more money than he started when he started giving it away. You know how it is. And she is a celebrity entertainment commentator. There are some conversations in this book about fat phobia and racism and gentrification and, the ethics of billionaires and all of this, and diversity in the workplace, all these things. And I'm not really sure how successful those conversations were. I support all of those things. And I appreciate that the author supports all of those things. And I appreciate that she's trying to indicate that this very rich man supports all those things. But I'm just not sure how successful those conversations really were. Also, content warning for CTE, extensive child abuse of the father that has passed. Also, a stalker and a toxic mom. That is on page. I just love them. I've been looking forward to this couple. They had great banter. I liked it. I don't know what to tell you. I'm a Kristen Ashley stan. Here I am. Then I read Something's Wrong with Us, volumes 8 through 12, 5 stars. This is a romantic thriller, dark, romancy. We are still not at an HEA. We are 12 volumes in, and I don't even know how close we are to maybe even finding a sliver of happiness in this world. That's not really true. There's plenty of good things happening as well. But this is definitely the manga series that has the best storyline of all of the ones that I have picked up. This is the one where if the plot is a thing for you, then this is the one to go for. It's a marriage of convenience between 2 childhood friends. However, her mother went to prison and died there because he said that she murdered his father. And he does not realize that is his childhood friend that he is falling in love with. And they own a sweets shop, and she wants to take it. And there's all sorts of twists and turns. Here, there, everywhere. All over the place. You definitely have a toxic mother. His mother is very toxic, and just toxic family in general. Just all sorts of things. Also, I would say general content warning for the series would also be miscarriage. So it is dark, but it's really, really good. And I just never know really where we're going to go with it. And I enjoy the twists and turns that we take. Then I read Butcher and Blackbird, the Ruinous Love Trilogy, number 1 by Bryn Weaver. I gave this 3 stars. So here's the thing. These are rival serial killers. Not really rival. They're just both serial killers. And they are actually kind of serial killers of serial killers. And they have a very interesting meet cute. He rescues her. And then they set up a game and they meet up once a year. They don't know who their target is. His brother gives them a target, and they are going to hunt a serial killer. And they do that. And this man loves her for like 4 years before she gives him a chance. It's a slow burn in that sense. And you might be like, Heather, all of this sounds great. They're so cute together. They kill people together. Support. Why is it 3 stars? Well, I'm glad you asked. All of that was true. I really liked all of those things. However, I'm gonna try and get through this. There's some cannibalism in here, which, to be fair, was in the content warnings. There were extensive content warnings at the beginning of this book, which I do really appreciate. However, and I am kind of sensitive to these things, so I might not be the best measure of it, but I gagged multiple times in this book. As a matter of fact, if I gagged one more time, I would have had to DNF because I can't do it. I can't do it. I really can't. So that was the cannibalism specifically, mainly. And then I did this thing. I hate it so much. I don't understand why we do it. It did this thing where they don't have sex, right? They don't have sex. And then she gets really injured, right? And should not be doing sexual activities. And 6 hours after this huge injury, major injury, that's when we decide to have a ridiculous sex marathon. And I'm reading this with my neck like strained, right? And I'm reading it and it's her shoulder that is hurt. So I'm lying there with my hurt neck watching this woman who just got her shoulder crushed have sex here, there, everywhere. This position, that position, up, down, all around. And I'm just like, what are we doing? It hurts. It hurts right now. I can feel your pain. And it's not even that bad because it's not as bad of an injury at all. And like, why are you doing this? It just doesn't make any sense. You don't need to show me how amazing the sex was that you could do it and enjoy it with such a grave injury. Like, heal. The laws, physics, like, medical. I don't have the words, but like the physical laws that govern your body don't just disappear because of orgasms and love. Now was not the time for the sex marathon, especially not the rough sex marathon, again, with like a plethora of positions. Just like, I don't know, you couldn't do this the day before? Why are we doing it with the crushed shoulder? Make it make sense. It doesn't make sense. And furthermore, like, I hate that it's like a micro trope in romance books, particularly like dark or romantic suspense or any of these. One of your characters does not have to like take a bullet or something and then have sex immediately after. It doesn't make any sense. On the rare book where they have an injury and then they talk about like not having sex for 6 weeks or 3 months or whatever, I'm like, thank you, I appreciate you and your reality check. Then I read Summerskate House, which is Ghost and Reincarnation, #1 by Kristen Ashley. I gave this 4 stars. This is one of her older books that I never read, one of the very few older books I never read. So he is a earl and he has a haunted mansion, and his sister and her brother were married. They died in a car crash. They left their children to their joint guardianship. So she has packed up her entire life in America and is moving to England into this haunted mansion with his toxic mother and him. Why no one bothered to correct me? All these years I thought that the love interest was a ghost, but he's not. He's just a regular human who happens to have a little bit of a haunting in his house that he doesn't even believe in, mind you. But anywho, this has very dubious consent. A lot of dubious consent. And it's not a dark romance. It's supposed to be a contemporary romance and stuff with, you know, a touch of ghost haunting. So, that being said, if you do not like alpha and dubious consent and, you know, the grumpy, I'm not going to communicate to you, kind of a-hole, love interest, you are not going to like this book at all. At all. So I would not pick it up if all of that is not a plus for you. I do like some dubious consent in my books, and so even though I was like that's not great practice, I still enjoyed the book. But if you don't like it, you're not going to. Yeah, overall I just really enjoyed it. Then I read Sweet Heat, which is sugared and spiced, #2 by Lady Marie. I gave this 4 stars. This is a erotic novella. So we have a married couple, and she was his sugar baby back in the day, and they have decided to try and find a third, and she is the cousin of the sugar baby in the first book. And her cousin convinces her to try it, and she is she has been with couples in the past, although not long term or anything, and they just are really into each other, and it was hot. And I really liked that it was 2 women and 1 man, because I feel like we don't get that pairing as often, and I really liked that that's what we got. And they just love spoiling each other, and it was sweet and hot. Lastly, I read Return to Monte Carlo by Kate C. Wells. I gave this 5 stars. Here's the thing, Kate C. Wells, her books are like 200 pages. Like barely 200 pages. And I would read a 500-page book about these characters. Absolutely no problem. I would read it. So I hate when people complain about the length of the book, because like the author wrote the length of the book on purpose. So I kind of hate when people complain about it. However, that would be my biggest complaint of this book, is that I just would have loved hundreds more pages of it. So this takes place in the 80s, and we are open up on the disastrous first anniversary dinner. He is incredibly rich. He's Italian. His family is not very welcoming to her, although they are polite, but cuttingly so. She's from Texas. She was 19 years old. She was a virgin, all of that. A beauty. He was smitten with her, and then they have had a pretty unhappy first year of marriage. He's never home. He's always working, and they have really good sex, and that's it. They don't really have great conversations. They just aren't really together much. And so you have this disaster. She leaves. She finds out that she is pregnant. He eventually comes and is like, you're not leaving me. This has consensual non-consent. Some of it is rough sex. Some of it I think could border a little bit on dubious consent, but it is consensual non-consent. He is very conflicted by this, feels like he's treating his wife like a whore, and especially now that he's pregnant, he's just like, I have to stop. This is one where the 2 of them are not communicating, and they think that non-communication, each one is assuming that this thing is what they're communicating, and they're not on the same page at all. So we do see them communicate some and get on the same page. I would have loved to see even more. I won't lie to you. I would have loved to have another 100 pages of them actually talking to each other and putting each other first and all of this. However, amazing. Phenomenal. Kate C. Wells can do no wrong. I just love her writing. I love her books. I love her characters. This is so good. It's just like 2 people who love each other and don't really know how, and they don't know how to communicate, and they don't know how to get out of their own heads, and they have a lot of obstacles in their way. They're from wildly different worlds, and he, has trauma of his father dying and his family shipping him off to boarding school and just not loving him and stuff, and he just like desperately loves her. She's the only thing he's ever taken for himself, and I just love them. I love them, and I love them and their little baby. It's just great. Like, I don't know what to tell you. So it is Secret Baby, although that's basically one conversation. Like, it's not a huge thing in the book. Yeah, they're so cute. And by cute, I mean problematic little people who like need each other and don't know how to do it. And I love them. I love them. Would I pick up this book if I just heard about it? No. I might, based on the consensual non-consent, because that is my favorite kink. But otherwise, no. However, as soon as I heard Kate C. Wells was writing it, I couldn't wait. I could not wait, and I had a child's birthday party, and this book was my reward for being done with that. And I sat, I read it, and I had a wonderful time. And again, I would read another 300 pages like that. So that's it. That's all the books that I read in September. Let me know if you have read or want to read any of these, or if you have any recommendation based on the things that I loved, let me know. And that's it. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.